On this episode, we speak with Robin, who gave birth in Kamakura.
I had a whole birth plan, but by this point, I threw it out the window.
She moved to Japan halfway through her pregnancy, but says it was the best decision she could have made.
And I was so impressed by the care compared to what I've had in Holland, which Holland was already very good.
And shares with us her experience at a postpartum retreat.
You're really taken care of, and you're also just really with your baby. And that's what really helped me.
Hello and welcome to Birth Stories of Japan. Hello Robin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Hey, I'd love to start off with a little bit of an introduction. So just yours and your family's names, ages, and where you're located.
Okay, well, my name's Robin. I'm 27 years old. I came to Japan in April. Actually a little bit earlier, but April is when we moved to Kamakura. I'm originally from Holland, and my husband's 47, and his name's Jack. My husband's Japanese Canadian, so he was raised in Canada, so he's fluent in English, but he came to Japan for, I think it was after university, to work here, and he stayed ever since. Oh, and my daughter. Awesome. I have a daughter now, which still weird to say. I mean, it's been a month, but it's still like, wow, I'm a mother. It's so good. And she's named Oki.
Awesome. That's so cute. Oki or Oki? Oki.
Oki.
Oki. Cute. That's such a cute name. And then what was your journey to pregnancy like with Oki?
So I was with my husband for quite a long time, and we've always talked about children, but for the longest time I wasn't really ready because of my career. And at one point it's like, wow, I should stop taking the pill because we do want children and we're not getting any younger. And I thought, it could say like it's probably going to take a couple of months to get pregnant, because I've had friends and family around me that's taken months to conceive. So I quit the pill and I was pregnant the next month, really.
Wow.
Yeah. So I found out because I just didn't get my period. So I grabbed a test in the store and it was immediately two bright lines, like it was positive right away. And I didn't really have any complications or symptoms throughout my pregnancy, except for really bad nausea the first trimester. But everything else was pretty smooth, actually. I was very lucky.
That's awesome. And do you want to go through your pregnancy journey? So when did you decide to move to Japan, and what was the whole process like then? I'm sure it would have been a tough decision to come here maybe and give birth.
Well, the original plan was actually to go back to Holland to give birth. So that was not part of the plan or in my mind when I came here. But we already decided to move here 2 years ago because we bought a house here, but it wasn't ready. Like, it had to be renovated. And they're actually, I don't know if you hear anything outside, but they're still working on the yard. And But yeah, we kind of had to wait out after COVID for me to be able to get my visa to come here. And once we found out I was pregnant, it's like, well, we gotta, move a little bit quicker. Like, there's, might as well go as soon as we can. And that's what we did. So that's why I came here halfway through my pregnancy. The first couple of weeks, up until 20 weeks, I went to a clinic in Holland, and they would keep giving me they had online courses and online content to basically get through to prepare yourself for birth and for what you can do for pregnancy. So that's what I did, but not just basically on my own here in Japan, not with physical courses or anything. So first trimester was pretty tough with the nausea because I was nauseous all day and I couldn't really eat. But second trimester, I felt amazing. Like, I felt great. I had all my energy back and no bad symptoms. And it wasn't really until third trimester that towards the end, basically, or my end, that I started to notice something that I had to go to the hospital for.
And so before we get into that, I'd love to know, how did you go about finding a clinic and finding a care facility in Japan?
So my husband has a GP practice that he always goes to here, so we just asked if they knew any clinics that where they speak English, because I would like to, I don't speak any Japanese yet, so for me it was really important that they speak English, so there's full transparency and it's not just like a translation through my husband the entire time. So they recommended this one clinic in Azabu in Tokyo. It's Azabu Women's Clinic. So we went there for all the checkups and throughout the rest of my pregnancy before we found a hospital here in Kamakura. So we did ask the clinic, but because they were based in Tokyo, they only had recommendations for like hospitals around Tokyo. So we had to look for ourselves within the area. So we have great neighbors. They have children as well. So we asked them. We asked other people that we know that live in this area, like where they have like what hospitals they have experience with, and we basically heard from like multiple sources that the Kamakura Shonan one is really nice. So we went there to look at it and get like a little bit of an introduction, because again, I wanted to make sure that they have translation services or doctors that speak English, which they had. It was really great.
Nice. Awesome. And what was the care like there?
Well, so I've only been to that hospital twice, once for the introduction and once for one checkup after the introduction before I had to come back. But the care was really good. We had a doctor that spoke fluent English. There was also translation services. So there was always this lady with you that could translate anything. So this is actually like a bit of the funny part of the story. Like initially when I came to Japan, we kind of thought like, okay, for the birth, we'll come back to Holland because that's where we have a support system. That's where I have family. That's, they speak Dutch, a language that I understand. So it will be completely transparent. And then we came here and I had all my checkup, like the rest of the checkups from week 20 on here. And I was so impressed by the care compared to what I've had in Holland, which Holland was already very good. But Japan was just like, I was so impressed. Like they were so good. Like every time you get a scan done, you have so much more. Like I had to do additional blood tests and everything because I have a negative blood type. And it was so good. It was so transparent. It was very clear. I felt very well taken care of. That's why I kind of came with no expectations. So I was pleasantly surprised. And because of that, throughout like the weeks, I already started to think like, oh, maybe we should, like I already got like a little bit of a feeling, maybe we should stay here because the care is so good. We have the house here, the nursery's here. We have a dog that we don't really want to fly back and forth as well, or flying with a newborn also seems pretty challenging. So
That's amazing. That's so cool to hear. Did you find out baby's gender?
I did. I did a nip test at week 12, and that's how we found out the gender.
Awesome. And how was that for you?
Oh, excited. Like I was so convinced it was a boy, and so was my husband. Like everybody was convinced it was a boy, and it turned out to be a girl. And I was actually so happy because I only had a girl's name prepared.
How cool. Oh, it was meant to be then, hey.
I think so.
And then so you had 2 checkups at the hospital, and then how about further on from that?
Well, so I had a bit of a complication. I had so at week 34, I started to notice that I had a lot of what I thought was watery discharge, and I walked around with it for a couple of days until this might be too much information, but I was literally like, I was wearing pants and they were completely soaked within an hour. And that's when I started to realize like this is not normal. So and this was at 12 o'clock at night. I told my husband, like, if there's anything I should tell you, right? And he kind of like gave me this look like, what's going on? I'm like, well, okay, I think we need to go to the hospital for a checkup because maybe my water broke. So we drove down to the hospital, and so we got in. It was in the middle of the night, and the first thing they did was just to check if it was amniotic fluid, which it turned out it was. So it turns out that I had a premature rupture of my membrane, and I was not prepared. I did not have a hospital bag. I honestly thought like when we walked into the hospital that they were just going to tell me like, oh no, everything's okay, you can go home again, this is normal, because pregnancy comes with so many weird changes to your body. I actually thought maybe this is okay, but just to make sure, because online it says it could be something else, let me just check it.
Sure.
And when they found out it was amniotic fluid, they were like, yeah, we gotta keep you here, you can't go home anymore. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
And so this was at 2 in the morning, and from there on it was, yeah, so they did additional tests. I had to do another blood tests, and then yeah, when the diagnosis came out, I was also at 34 weeks, and that's when they told me that they couldn't keep me at that hospital because I had to go to an NICU department, and the Shonan, like the hospital I was at, doesn't have it. So at that
Mm.
point, I got wheeled with an ambulance to another hospital nearby that I had never been to before, and that
Mm.
was yeah, start of my whole birth journey, basically.
Yeah, wow. And how were you feeling at that time, just knowing that you weren't just going to go straight home like you thought it was something bigger than that?
I was The moment it was happening, it felt like it was a really bad movie I was in. Like it didn't feel real
Mm.
until I got to the other hospital and we were waiting for a translator, and I was just like, I didn't know where I was. I was kind of freaking out because we prepared everything so well. We found the hospital. I was so confident and I was so comfortable in that place
Yeah.
that suddenly everything we prepared for was like kind of thrown out the window. But I was also scared because you don't usually get wheeled into a hospital by ambulance. And in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, this could be a really bad thing. I was just worried that, well, I had a lot of worries, but my biggest worry was probably the child. Like, if she was okay, like maybe she was not okay. So yeah, I got wheeled into Tsujido Hospital, and I got sent straight to the NICU department. And at first, you see a new doctor, everything's new. You're kind of like, what's going on? But eventually, they give you like a really clear, like the doctor came in basically at 7 in the morning. I was the first patient he came to, and he told me like, oh yeah, you have to stay here. We're gonna do additional tests, and we're gonna, put you on antibiotics. We're gonna monitor the baby the entire time because that was very important to monitor the baby. And I asked for like a private room because you can actually choose between having a shared room or a private room. And I thought a private room would, at least in this situation, help me a little bit because then I can still call my husband or other people to have a little bit more support. And then yeah, I was really stressed, but while I was staying there, it's just everybody was so nice. The doctor was really good as well. The doctor spoke English as well. So that was a bit of a relief because when we first got wheeled in, nobody spoke English, but I had my husband with me, which could do all the translation. So once I heard the doctor speak English, I was like, okay, like this is good. Because I always want to know what's going on. That kind of helps me process what's going on and keeping me calm.
Mm.
And eventually, I was in the hospital for 2 weeks
Wow.
with monitoring the baby and the antibiotics. And throughout the hospital stay, you see all the nurses. Some speak English, some don't. There was also translation services in the hospital as well. But everybody was just really kind and really, even though some couldn't speak English, they really tried to communicate with me throughout. Like they had like little devices where they could do translations on. We used our phones, we used hand sign languages, and it was eventually like after the first couple of days, you get used to being in a hospital and you see like the same faces over and over again. You're like, okay, I feel well taken care of. It's gone. Like I kept telling myself it's going to be okay. So that really helped. It's the only thing I found really tough is that because it was the NICU, they still have really strict COVID regulations. So I could only have one visitor per day for 15 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So that kind of did not help when I was staying
Yeah,
there all on my own.
gosh.
I didn't know where I was.
Yeah. gosh. So how was that for your husband as well?
Really tough because he wanted to be there with me as well, and we didn't really know what was going on. And especially so after the 2 weeks of like antibiotics and monitoring, I got to almost week 36, and that's when it was safe to do the induction because she seemed healthy and stronger. And that's also when you're further along. So the longer you can wait, the better it would be for the baby to be born. That's when they decided to induce me. So the first moment I heard like, oh, we're going to get an induction done, I was already very scared because, again, I had a whole birth plan, but by this point, I threw it out the window. I forgot about my birth plan. I was just let everything happen. But it was still, I did, really wish like my husband could have been there longer during the induction because I had a really long induction. Mine was 4 days eventually.
Wow.
But yeah, he could only visit me like 15 minutes every day. And at that moment, especially because you don't know when it's really going to happen, I just needed a little bit more support.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So you are almost at week 36. You start your induction. Do you know what they used for your induction?
Yeah. So they started off with Pitocin, and they told me they're going to start with a very low dose and they're going to build it up over time. And they did it from 9 till 5, like during office hours, which I found a little bit funny, but it makes sense because that's when the doctor is there. So I was on Pitocin for 2 days, and I mean, we're all a little bit surprised because after 2 days, there's still no baby. I had additional tests done to see if I had any dilation or if I reacted to the meds at all, which thankfully I did, but very little. Like my body didn't respond to Pitocin very well. Like I only had 1 centimeter dilation. So the doctor decided to switch up the medication. So instead, like from day 3 and 4, well, day 3 and we didn't know how long it was going to take. Basically, they changed it up to prostaglandin, and it was all through IV, both inductions.
Right. And how did you feel during those 4 days?
Oh, it was challenging. It was very hard because I couldn't have the induction medication in my room. I had to go to this delivery room. So the first day especially, I was like, you get wheeled into this delivery room, you're already really stressed out, like, oh my God, it's happening. And then nothing happened for 2 days. And then by day 3, you're like, okay, I know the drill. I'm going to just sit on this delivery chair and just, get it going. Let's see if anything happens. And yeah, it was very weird because, well, thankfully I could have my phone. I had data and everything. So I kept very close touch with family and friends and my husband to like keep myself distracted. I also still felt like everything was so unreal. I think I was in survival mode the entire time until like afterwards, because I wasn't really not paying attention, but I wasn't really busy thinking about how stressful everything was. I was just like, okay, the baby needs to come here, he needs to come safely. What can I do to like, to make sure everything's okay? But I wasn't really thinking about how crazy everything was until afterwards, basically.
Sure. Yeah, sure. And then now, do you want to take us through when contractions started and going into full labor, active labor?
Oh, that's a good story. So, the 4th day, I started to get very strong contractions. And the doctor came in a couple of times to check up on me. And because you were like wearing the monitors, they can see if you have contractions. They can also see the baby's heartbeat. And which I thought was having pretty strong contractions because I never, experienced that kind of pain before. And the doctor came in and was like, oh no, you're still fine. You're still talking.
My gosh.
So I was like, wait, it's supposed to be worse from here? And yeah, basically I had those contractions all day until my husband came at 4 o'clock to visit me. And we kind of because I was in this separate room, the delivery room, they were also very nice. They understood my situation. Like I can't really speak, so it was kind of like they kind of liked him there as well because if the translation services were not around, they could tell him everything and he could tell me what's going on. Because sometimes they like the nurses had to tell you something. And so my husband came at 4 o'clock and he was there for about 40 minutes and they wanted to kick him out. And the moment they came in to ask him to leave, my water completely broke.
Wow.
And that's when the pain started. Like that's when it became so I could not talk. I screamed. So everybody was like, what's going on? But it was great because that made my husband could stay a little bit longer. And that's when the contractions became very intense. That's when they also turned off the prostaglandin, like the induction IV. And that's when my body kind of took over naturally. And that's when it really started. I kind of wanted him to leave, but he was insisting on staying. So that was a bit stressful. But eventually they made the decision like, okay, he can stay because it's going to happen anytime now. And then I personally, I had contractions all night. It was very tough. But at one point I was like, no, this feels different. I feel like I have to push. So, and it was in the middle of the night, so the doctor wasn't there, but you had all the nurses, but the nurses don't really speak English well. So it was honestly a blessing that he was there. And he told the nurses like, oh, she's feeling this way. We need to, like, is she okay? We need to check, like, she, if everything's all right. And that's when they checked my dilation. That's when they felt the baby's head. And that's when we really got to prepare for the pushing and everything. And so that was good. I think that was like 3 a.m. So from 3 to 5, it was like active labor. I don't even know what kind of stages of labor there are. I experienced it all, but
it all feels like a bit of a blur, hey?
It does. I'm really happy that I forgot how painful everything is, because apparently this is something I do remember asking or begging my husband, but there's a couple of moments where I was so desperate that I was like, please just ask for an epidural. I can't do this anymore. And they're like, yeah, no, because they don't do epidurals. They only do natural birth or C-sections if it's necessary. It's a very Japanese thing, I think, which originally I wanted to have a natural birth when I was going to the other hospital because I thought everything was going to be a normal situation, but with the induction, contractions are much stronger. And I still had to do natural birth, which, I mean, I'm still right now thankful for, because otherwise it would have been a C-section, and that was something I was very scared of. But yeah, it was good that he was there. He could even try to negotiate for an epidural, or I think I begged for a C-section at one point because I was so tired after those days.
Yeah, I bet. And that would have just been really good to like have him there as your supporter, not even with all the medical stuff, but just to have, your husband by your side would have been, so much help, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I could have gone through all of that without him, because he was the one familiar face. He was the one person that I felt really comfortable around, and especially in the whole situation where you feel like, okay, you can't really communicate. You're in this strange country. It's just everything's so bizarre. It's nice to see a familiar face and someone you're comfortable with around you.
Yeah, for sure. And then how about giving birth? So what was the final stages of your labor like?
Hectic. It was very painful because I started to feel like I had to push. And before, because, then we called the nurse in, they felt the head, so they started preparing everything. That's when they started calling the other nurses as well. They kept telling me, like, wait a little bit longer, but you can't do that when your body's doing everything naturally. So I was a bit confused, but eventually we got everything ready and I was allowed to push, and it was just, again, my husband was very useful because he told me, like, okay, just listen to your body, and when you feel like you have to push, push. And he was there, and my God, I don't think I've ever screamed that loudly before, but I screamed. It was very painful. But I did it. She came out after, I think we had like 7 pushes. It was a bit long, and it was also a bit, scary because her umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck as well. So it was kind of. There was one thing I was a bit upset about. That was when she came out. Normally you have like immediate skin to skin, but because I was in an ICU and she had the umbilical cord wrapped around her, they took her away, and I didn't get skin to skin until I think about like 30, 40 minutes after she was born.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So that was a bit, that's the one thing I was a bit upset with, but everything else was, pretty good afterwards. Because the moment she came out, it was just, I didn't even care. Like, I needed to get some stitches done, and then the placenta has to come. Like, again, that's something I did not prepare for. The whole giving birth
Yes.
to placenta. All I can say, it's painful. Like they suddenly start pressing on your belly and they, start taking it out. It's just, oh my God. I didn't
Oh,
know what was going on the
wow.
entire time. But
So did they tell you that that was going to happen? Like they were going to do that to you? Or did they give you the option to but like birth it like without the pushing?
no, they didn't give me that option. And I
Mm,
think it's also because I was in the NICU, it's a bit of a different procedure than normally. I don't know. I've not
okay.
had birth like in a normal facility. Like this was a special case, but they told my husband and he told me like, hey, let them do it. This is what they do. And I kind of just let everything happen. So by this point, I kind of surrendered to the whole situation. And that's, I
Yeah.
think, how I also got through the entire birth and staying in the hospital. Like I was just fully surrendered to the situation and to everything. And I kind of put my mind to zero and I just let everything pass and happen. And I didn't realize how, yeah, crazy it was until my daughter was born, basically. Yeah, my daughter was born 6th of June 2023 at 3 kilos. When she was finally there and we finally made it, and they did all the tests and she was healthy except for like low blood glucose and some other things. But that's when I realized, like, oh my God, this is crazy what I just gone through. And I just couldn't stop crying. But it was weird because I was crying out of shock, but it was also crying out of happiness, like pure tears of happiness that we've made it, we're good. And it was a very emotional and dramatic moment.
Yeah, I bet you are so, so strong. I can only imagine. And so now I'd love to go into your postpartum recovery. So after the delivery, what was it like from then on?
Um, Afterwards, so we got an hour, like once every test was over and we got the baby in our hands because she was healthy, we got to spend a little bit of time with her without the doctors or the nurses, like just me, my husband, and the newborn baby, basically. And that was about an hour and a half before they had to kick him out because hospital, right? Because again, visitors was only allowed between 2 and 5 for 15 minutes. So, but by that time I was so exhausted as well from the 4 days of induction and then the whole night long labor, basically, that I was very tired. So they took, like, after that hour and a half, they took the baby and I got to sleep a little bit. And after my nap, basically, they came with the translation services as well. And that's when they started to really go through what the whole week is going to look like. They had a whole planning of, okay, this is like the whole week because I had to stay for another week in the hospital. And this is all the care you're going to get like each day. So this day you're going to have a blood test, and this day we're going to help you with the breastfeeding, and this is when we're going to teach you how to wash the baby. So it was a combination of postpartum monitoring to see if I'm still healthy, if the baby is okay, but also preparing myself to be dismissed and be able to take care of a baby. And it was
Mm,
very helpful because I had because she was a premature baby, my body was having issues with breastfeeding and breast milk supply.
sure.
So they kind of needed to help me get that going. And Eventually, it was not smooth because I basically had nothing the first couple of days, which was longer than usual, and then it finally came in, but everything was clogged up. So they were completely engorged. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I suddenly woke up the morning after with breasts that were like 3 cups size bigger. So that was very crazy, but that's when they helped me massage it as well and like teach me how to massage and express myself in case that happens. And yeah, it was a lot of resting, especially the first days. Like they didn't really want me to leave the bed or the room. Like you get food 3 times a day. They take blood every morning to see if you're still okay. You know, they do leave the baby in your room if you want to. So I decided to do that because I mean, she was just born. Like I didn't want her to be at the nursing station the entire time.
Yeah. And then, so how about your physical and also your mental recovery? What was that like?
I think physical, like it was tough, but it just happens. Like you get through it. Like it was a bit painful because I had stitches done, so I was a bit scared to go to the washroom or scared to do anything really down there. Like I didn't want to wipe. I didn't want to even take a like I was even like with showering, I was just scared because you have stitches down there. Like I had a friend, she told me like you give birth 3 times. The actual birth, the placenta, and the first poop after giving birth. Yeah, and so she told
Yeah.
me, and I was at that point just, kind of not wanting to go to the toilet, and it was like 2 days that had passed since birth, and it was coming, and I was just terrified, but that was just a small minor thing. The toughest part was probably the mental. I mean, it is a bit traumatic to like go through everything, and when it's going, like when it's all happening, you're in survival mode. You kind of don't, you're not so aware of what's going on. But for me, it was the aftershock, like how crazy it was, like everything that I went through and how unreal it all felt. So that definitely took me a couple of days to process.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to talk about that? What helped for you? What didn't help?
Um, for me, it's really what I notice now is just time. Like now that a month has passed, I'm actually okay now. Like the first days after birth, like it was just like, oh, the shock of what was going to, like what just happened and everything. But it wasn't like the blues didn't really come in for me until the second week, like when we got home. I remember like, especially like a couple of times, like in the late afternoon or early evening when I just started crying and I don't know why I was crying.
Mm,
I thought it was like not okay, but then eventually I think it was also again like sleep deprivation, change of everything, and the me crying and not knowing why I was crying was giving me anxiety as well as you suddenly have this whole responsibility of a baby that I always thought I was really ready for it because I always wanted children, but then when you're suddenly having a daughter, it's still very different. Yeah, it's just for me, it took some time. Like now I'm okay and I'm feeling great, but it just took a couple of weeks of getting used to your new life, your new like the new rhythm of life. And I also went to a postpartum, what is it like resort, which really helped me as well, I think.
yeah, I would love to know more about this resort, this retreat that you went to, because you're the first one who's ever brought up this whole situation. So, do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so my husband booked this like as a treat. He was like, you did so well. There's this postpartum resort. It's called Hayama or Mom Garden in Hayama, and it's quite a new concept, I think, because they opened up a year ago or 2 years ago. But it's basically a resort where you, as a mother and the baby, stay at. They have a nursing station, so if you want someone else to take care of your baby, they're like available 24/7. So you can get some sleep at night as well. Like they just take over complete care of your baby. And they also have, because they have the whole nursing station, they have lots of nurses walking around, and they also have like breastfeeding consultants. So I was really happy that I was there because they basically really helped me. Like if you had any questions, because every morning they would also ask you like, how do you feel? Do you have any pain anywhere? they really monitor it. Like you can monitor it because you can weigh the baby before and after breastfeeding, so you see how much she has drank. You can do pumping, so you can see how much you're pumping, and they would help with the massages as well, or like helping teach you how to properly latch. And they also gave you like advice, like medical advice, like, okay, you should just be breastfeeding, like don't pump for a little bit. And they have classes for moms, so they had like yoga classes, meditation classes, as well as other activities. They had like a spa, so you can get a massage in. Yeah, foot baths. There were a couple nurses that spoke fluent English, but in general, it's like everything's Japanese only. I think they accommodated to me. They tried their best, and it was good. I think what also helped me is talking to other moms, because they're all new mothers, so everybody's going through the same thing, and they had these rooms where you could breastfeed them, with where all the other like mothers would breastfeed them as well if you didn't want to do it in your own room. And for some reason, it really helps seeing all these other women go through the same thing, and you're kind of all in it together, like this whole new life of motherhood, basically. I remember the first week when I came home, I was taking care of the baby, but I was also cleaning the house and doing everything that I was doing before I had the baby. And because I was in this resort, you can't clean the house, you can't do anything else. You're really taken care of, and you're also just really with your baby. And that's what really helped me with the baby blues and the mental recovery.
That sounds incredible. I feel like everyone needs to go to these, and if they're only a new idea, they are so brilliant. They need to be everywhere.
I think so too. Honestly, it's helped me a lot. And I think it's quite a new concept. It's popular in a couple of countries, but I've talked to some friends back in Europe and family about this, and everybody's like, they should have this here. Like, why is this not a thing?
Yeah, that's so amazing. And then how was it transitioning from the resort to back home?
Um, I mean, at first, because I was in a resort for 11 days, I was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to go home now, because after a couple of days, I got cabin fever pretty quickly. Like, it happened to me in COVID, it happened to me in the hospital in Tsujido, and it happened to me there. But once I was gone and I was in the house again, I was like, oh, I miss it sometimes. I still do.
I bet, yeah.
Because I got this really nice routine in of like, I just dropped her off in the evening, picked her up in the morning, and now that I'm back home, I feel like I have less time for myself.
I'd love to know, do you know the cost of the birth and also the retreat by any chance?
The birth, I don't know, because my husband had to pay before, because I came here. I am now registered in Kamakura, but because we came here and everything happened so quickly, like I wasn't registered in the city hall yet, so I didn't have my insurance yet, so we had to pay everything out of pocket. So my husband paid everything when I was still in the NICU room, because they would not let me go out before everything was paid. So I don't want to know how much it was, honestly.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, maybe we'll leave that as is.
Yeah, but the postpartum, the retreat is, so yeah, because it's a hotel basically, or a resort. There's like no insurance coverage. So yeah, they also have prices. So the minimum stay was 10 days if you stay within a month after discharge of the hospital. So I had to stay for 10 days, but I ended up staying 11 days because I wanted one more day.
Sure.
And it also depends on what room you have. So like the minimum, if you stay less than 13 nights, is 42,000 yen a night.
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty expensive, actually. Wait, hold on.
Regardless of price, time is very important, and your mental health, your physical health, and your recovery is very important. So that's really good to know that there's an option like that out there.
Yeah, I think so as well.
So, just before we say goodbye, I have a milk bottle here, and it's just got a few questions. I'm going to pull one out and ask you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Right. As someone relatively new to Japan, were there any times you felt hesitant or unsure and wish you were given more help with?
I wouldn't call it unsure, but I think the most frustrating part is that sometimes you do feel like you can't read, so you already feel illiterate a little bit. And you always have to have translation services or someone translate for you. You're always scared something is going to get lost in translation, and you feel like you're not getting like the complete picture. Like that was one thing I was feeling here and there. It's, though, especially my husband's a very good translator. Like he's fluent in both languages, but you had the nurses, and I felt like when they were with me, we had to use devices to translate things, and it would just be a sentence or two that they would tell me. And then my husband came to visit and they had complete stories to tell him for him to translate to me. So I felt like that was the most frustrating part, but it's not, I kind of see it differently because I came here. I made the decision to come here, and it's up to me to learn the language and not have to be confronted with this in the future. And it's very motivating for me as well to learn the language.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good way to put it. Hey, yeah. Awesome. And I'll just ask one more. Do you have any tips or suggestions for someone new to Japan looking for a care facility to give birth at?
Yes. One of the tips, or at least what I can say, is it doesn't matter where you end up. If you end up somewhere where you didn't expect to end up, it's still going to be okay. It's all going to be fine. Don't, over stress about, oh, I have to be in this place because they have translation services, because turns out most hospitals have that. And my biggest tip is to just source around, like, I don't know if you have friends or neighbors or other people that that have experience in places. Just ask them like what their experience is like and go from there. It's 'cause I didn't, when we were looking on the internet for a place, the Shonan Kamakura hospital didn't even show up. And turned out it was like a 5-minute drive from where we lived to. Crazy, right?
Wow. And then, so do you have anything else to add before we go?
Yeah, like, okay, there's one thing, like, in the beginning, you might feel like you're so alone in, like, the whole, like, pregnancy already feels very lonely. And so does motherhood, especially early motherhood. But you're not alone. Not at all. Like, but that's something I experienced in the Hayama, like, resort. Like, you see all these mothers, like, in new motherhood. That's suddenly when you felt that. It's not really community, but, it's, I don't know the right word for it, but it's just, you see all these other women go through it. Like, everybody goes through it. It's okay. Like, it's okay to sometimes feel lonely in this situation as well, but it's, you're never alone.
Yeah, that is so, so beautiful. And that's honestly one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this podcast, just to bring people together, because it's the same thing. Maybe we've never met in real life, but just hearing other people's stories or knowing that someone else is there and in a similar situation, it just makes you feel so much more stronger. I don't know. That's how I feel anyways.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It kind of feels like there's somewhat of a community around it, and it's like, okay, well, they've gone through it, we can all go through it. Like, yeah, it's kind of like strengthening in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm 100% positive that somebody else listening to your story today will feel that strength as well. So I just want to thank you so, so much for sharing your story today.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me share my story.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So if you'd like to hear more birth stories, please subscribe to this channel. Giving us a like also helps other moms see this video too, so please give us a thumbs up if you can. You can check out the description for more information about bits mentioned in this episode, but if you have any other questions or feedback, please leave a comment below or get in touch. And lastly, if you're a mama that has a story to tell, please send an email to birthstoriesjp@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.